Good afternoon from the middle of Jerusalem. It's good morning to you across the ocean for all of you in North America. I'm here with my dear colleague and friend, Khaled Abou-Toimeh. I'm Dan Diker, president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, and we're here as part of our daily wartime diplomacy briefing, giving you behind-the-scenes insight, context, perspective, analysis on what is happening here on day 130 of this Hamas-Iran Israel war that is now taking place, continuing to take place in Gaza, and overnight I would say miraculous hostage rescue by Israel's special units in Rafah, in Rafiah, which two elderly hostages were rescued by special forces and actually in a sling released outside the window, and they ran to safety, being protected all the time by Israel's special forces, and they're now reunited with their families. One of the most dramatic rescue operations since Entebbe in 1976. At the same time, tragically, two members of the same family were killed by an Iranian mobilized rocket into Israel's northern community of Kiryat Shmona. And that raises some very serious questions about how viable continuing to live in a situation, even whereby Israeli 85, 90,000 Israelis who are today refugees in their own country can actually possibly go back to their homes if, in fact, Israel, through international and third-party mediators, succeeds to push the Hezbollah back 10 or 11 kilometers so that the Redwan forces no longer pose an immediate strategic threat through tunnel terror into northern Israel. It seems like a real long shot. I will share with our listeners that I met with some very high-ranking members of the Israeli government just a few days ago and discussed these scenarios with them. Their hope is still that Israel can avoid a potential major conflict with Iran's number one proxy force, a terror army, no less, the Hezbollah, holding between 150 and 200,000 rockets, laser-guided missiles, and highly trained forces that could, at the drop of a hat, pass through these tunnels, just like the Hamas did on October the 7th, to kill and capture and terrorize thousands of Israelis in the north. So that obviously is a non-starter, and it really remains to be seen whether Israel in the coming weeks or few months is going to launch a major operation up in the north so that this completely intolerable situation by which Israel does not have any defensible borders. It doesn't have borders that have buffer zones, that have any kind of strategic depth or width to allow this teeny little nation state to live in peace and in security. So that's going to be that's really a question that has to be answered. We're very lucky today to be joined by a longtime colleague and friend of ours, David Parsons, Vice President and Senior Spokesman for the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, which is really the gateway, the communications nerve center to the vast majority of the hundreds of millions of evangelical Christians around the world. The International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, or the ICEJ, has been one of Israel's staunchest allies and closest friends for decades. And I had the pleasure of meeting David Parsons many years ago, and he continues in his illustrious position, sending important messages on behalf of Israel and the Jewish people worldwide to the hundreds of millions, even 500 million evangelical Christians worldwide. And today, David, very good to have you. Khaled and I are delighted to engage you in discussion. First of all, headline, one of the probably best known dedicated evangelical personalities is former CIA Director and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Israel for a solidarity mission. As we speak, he is in the South, bearing witness to the mass destruction, terrorism, rape, burning that took place there by the Iranian-backed Hamas on October 7th and subsequently. And what is your sense about the importance of having Mike Pompeo, who could well be in an upcoming administration following the 2024 elections?
Hi, Dan. Look, first, it's great to be with you and Khalid. And we used to be neighbors just 2 doors down from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, but we moved to another part of Jerusalem. But we miss you, Dan, and but just good to be with you. Look, Mike Pompeo is really, as far as a conservative Christian political figure, I just have a tremendous amount of respect for him. I can't remember hardly any controversy. He knows how to play the game, even serving in the Trump administration. He did well in being, a great diplomat for America, but he also how to operate under Trump, and in a sort of a traditional, because Trump wasn't a traditional president, but Mike Pompeo really played the role of a Secretary of State in a way that most Americans could respect. But his faith has and his heart are with Israel, and I wish he was. In a way, I wish he was running for office this time as well. He could have challenged for the nomination, but I hope he serves some role for our country again soon.
Well, David, if you have a spare $100 million to help his
Help him,
election
yeah.
campaign, just if you
Yeah.
happen to have it lying around, I'm sure that Secretary Pompeo would enjoy it. Here's a question that we have from the JCPA for you. There are somewhere between 80 and 100 million evangelical Christians in North America. And the question is, or even in the United States alone, where is the vocal evangelical community? Israel and the Jewish people today are under fire, facing the most treacherous wave of Jew hatred that we have seen since the Nazi era. And here the evangelical community, it is no secret, played a key role, led by Mike Pompeo and his Jewish friend and colleague, former Ambassador David Friedman, in moving the American embassy to Jerusalem, an historic move. And clearly the evangelical community has been a staunch ally of Israel in the United States, but we are not seeing vocal expressions, public vocal expressions of support to the degree to which 80 to 100 million people would justify.
Or enough solidarity missions. We haven't seen many.
Oh, yeah, there was a major solidarity mission by ICEJ, I know, about a month ago. But besides that, Khalid makes a good point. Where are the stream of evangelical solidarity missions?
Yeah, look, we've done two in the last 3 weeks. One of them was denominational leaders representing probably 70, 80 million Christians in several denominations in Canada, the UK, Nigeria, Indonesia, Australia, and also in throughout Europe, a bunch of other countries. And then we had 70 pastors from 18 nations, and we're visiting Kfar Aza. We're visiting the kibbutz Nir Oz, some of the hardest hit communities. We visited the car graveyard, saw 1,300 burned out cars that each one represented, people who were in them, and some died, some wounded, some fled. And we've been we have around 5 solidarity missions coming up in the next 6 to 7 weeks. Some will be smaller VIP groups, denominational leaders again, from Argentina, from the US, from all kinds of countries. And there are rallies going on around the world. I think we've either organized or our people have taken part in pro-Israel rallies in at least 70 countries over the past 4 months. In some countries, it's been big news. In Finland, for instance, our director there, organized, I think it was 22 simultaneous rallies in the 22 main cities of Finland, that all these Christians came out. It may not make the news everywhere, but in Finland, this was a strong statement, especially with a new president coming in there. I think of Norway. We just had a rally in Oslo outside their parliament last Saturday. There were hundreds of Christians there, but what was historic about it is that you had clergy and Christian leaders from the Pentecostal, Protestant, and Catholic and evangelical Lutheran churches, all the churches but the former state Lutheran church, very liberal and sort of losing power, losing its position, but all the other clergy from all the other main churches in Norway were out there standing on a very cold Saturday morning in Oslo, standing with Israel. In the US, for instance, there were thousands of Christians at the Washington rally, 290,000 people there. I know they had John Hagee speak. Was it Mike Johnson, the new speaker, or so? There were members of Congress who were conservative Christians who spoke. But all they needed to do was, say, hey, how many out there are Christians? And I think you would have seen tens of thousands of those people standing up. Israel, the largest pro-Israel rally ever in Washington, that tens of thousands of them were Christians. My brother went up, our director came up from Florida, our national director. I know some other Christian groups, especially young groups, brought buses and all. So, we had tons of people there. You don't always see it. We just had a very unusual, again, first of its kind ever, where there's a whole Orthodox network of rabbis, Orthodox rabbis, joined with Christian pastors that are part of an umbrella we run, the American Christian Leaders for Israel, that we had 70 pastors and rabbis on Capitol Hill paired off with a couple pastors, a couple rabbis, meeting with 30, 40 members of Congress, a lobby day, right before the House passed this standalone bill for $17 billion. So we felt we had an impact there. Of course, that aid package to Israel is still a hot potato, a lot of work to do for it, but we were there lobbying in this unusual Christian-Jewish synergy to stand with Israel, which is so needed these days. But when you get into, rallying for your side, I've always been shocked, surprised, and even shocked how quickly, it's anti-Israel. It's more anti-Israel than pro-Palestinian. I think it's motivated more by hate than really caring about the Palestinian people, sad to say. But all the anti-Israel drop everything. I don't know how they keep jobs or whatever. It's like back during the Iranian hostage crisis, when they had 200 some Americans hostage. And I was in college at the time, and every day these Iranian students were out there protesting, and we always said, gosh, when do they study? Do they take tests? They're not in classes. All they do is protest.
That's right.
You're talking about the full half of the cup. What about the empty half of the cup? I mean, are there Christians who are having second thoughts about supporting Israel in light of what's happening in Gaza? Or do you feel that, are you worried? Is there a phenomena like this, or a trend?
Well, look, I think, first of all, to finish the thought, that you go out and parade in the street and get, very vitriolic and a lot of venom really against Israel that you see in some of these rallies, that they drop everything at the bat of a hat and they're out there in their tens of thousands. Whereas the motivation of whether you're a Jewish, Christian, or someone else, even Arabs, the love that you have for Israel, we don't hate the Arabs, we don't hate the Palestinians, but the love doesn't beat its chest, and it's got some patience to it. And it's not showy and angry and out there demonstrating, demanding its way. And over time, it proves itself. We've raised money for 4 ambulances. We've raised money for 11 new portable bomb shelters. We've raised money to renovate 130 underground bomb shelters. We've been feeding all kinds of evacuated families, helping house them when, millions of dollars that are coming in, not only through the Christian embassy, but through other means. That I think that is a sort of a different. Sure, we go to the rallies. We held a rally in Cape Town in South Africa. We were going to have 3,000 or 4,000 Christians at Sea Point Park in Cape Town, and
a dangerous place.
Yeah,
and there
very
was
dangerous.
there was a riot against it. There were 200 or 300 anti-Israel protesters who showed up and started beating up people. There was even a Jewish man from the local Jewish community in a wheelchair that had his hand broken by someone, beating up a man in a wheelchair. The riot was incited by the grandson of Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, his name is Mandela.
Yeah, Mandla Mandela. Yeah, and he incited this riot. There were guys with guns. There were imams wearing pistols, and the police arrested a bunch, and they started fighting the police. And we called. There were like 40, 50 buses on the way there, and they called them and said, "Don't." It was after church services on a Sunday morning, and then in the afternoon they'd come there, and we said, "Don't come." The police have called it off. But, we do this. We're willing to stand out there. But I think the Christian support for Israel is a lot like the Jewish support. You see sometimes demonstrations in the street. We've been out there in London, in Manchester. There was a recent one. I'm telling you, in 70 countries around the world, our people have been out there standing with Israel in actual rallies. But there's other ways that we show that support that don't always show up in the headlines. It's when you get angry and whatever. We don't have that motivation. That's not going to make a headline. We love Israel. It's when you hate someone that's what the press is interested in. Khaled's question about what direction, what's the trend in Christian support? There is a new book coming out by a professor. He's an Israeli professor at Pembroke. It's the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. I'm from North Carolina. We have one of the most extensive higher education networks in the U.S. I went to Wake Forest private school, Duke private school, but you've got Carolina at Chapel Hill, NC State, East Carolina, all these big schools. Pembroke is a little above a community college, but an Israeli professor up there is making waves with a new book he has from a survey that was taken. It's based on a survey he took and released in 2021 that says young evangelical Christians in the U.S., the support for Israel among them has dropped by 50%. And I think it is, we can't hide from it. It is a problem, but there's explanations for it. And by the time he has published his book now, if we're talking America, it's important to follow this particular trend. But by the time his book comes out, he's making a point he did not make when his survey came out 3 years ago, that supporting the Palestinians among young people is trendy and a way to rebel against your parents. And a lot of these young evangelical from evangelical families, I don't even know if I'd call them evangelical yet. They may have one we used to say you got one foot in the kingdom and one foot out, that you're serving God with, sort of half-heartedly. And these kids are very influenced. But among a lot of our churches in not only the U.S., North America, the young folks are supporting Israel. And around the world, if you follow it around the world, the support for Israel among evangelicals is growing by leaps and bounds, and that's young and old. The estimate is up to 700 million evangelicals worldwide. The center of that evangelical Christianity in general, has shifted from North America and Europe southward to what we call the global south, Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Brazil, 200 million people, about half are Christian, more than half, but about half of those are evangelicals, mostly Pentecostals. Around 30% are now evangelical Pentecostals. They elected Bolsonaro a few years ago. They got to bring him back. This new Javier Milei in Argentina, the evangelicals got behind him in voting and in prayer, and have put him in office, pro-Israel. Nigeria, you look at that, biggest population of any country in Africa, 200 million, about half Muslim, half Christian. Among the Christians, more than half are evangelicals and pro-Israel. So you've got these, the potential in a lot of these countries. You look at Papua New Guinea, there is a country that 100 years ago was not only still pagan, a lot of them were still cannibals. And today it's one of the most Christianized countries in the world. And they've not only opened an embassy in Jerusalem, they're going to open a consulate in Ariel, in the West Bank, up in the Shomron. They're totally behind Israel and in support. We hope all this groundswell of support matures politically, like the American Christian right did in the 80s under Reagan, and they found someone to get behind and got organized to have an impact. There's a lot of these countries that, as this these Christians who stand with Israel learn to operate in the political field, you're going to see more and more of this support for Israel around the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. David, it's an encouraging message that we're hearing from you. To what extent is this October 7th and its aftermath a watershed for Israel's potential stronger relationship with the global evangelical community, in the sense that it could possibly help enjoy better voting patterns at the UN through certainly with Europe and even some African countries with the predominance of evangelical Christianity there, as well as in the United States?
Yeah. Well, first of all, personally, I've lived here in Israel for 27 years, been visiting since 1982. And I've lived on the Arab side in East Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah, Mount of Olives, and Ator. I've lived on the western side now for all these years. And I've, been through some tough times, the second Intifada, the March of Suicide Bombers. But what happened on October 7th was the worst day of my life. And to see the bloodshed, the carnage, to experience evil being expressed like it was in degrading human life. I'm a witness to it. We were down there 2 days before with about 700 Christians from 50 countries on a solidarity visit to Sderot, to Kibbutz Alumim, Kfar Aza, Kibbutz Be'eri. We're all in that area that 2 days later was a huge killing field. And I think a lot of Christians out there, we realize we've still got a lot of work to do to help defend Israel really a demonic hatred, very sad hatred that was allowed, even with UN help, UN complicity, to brainwash a whole generation in Gaza. And that's very sad to see. And so we've got to have a lot of determination. Some of the old messages of, you love Israel because of this or that. After October 7, you've got to be able to explain how, the God that we Christians serve. There's this sort of it's been around Christianity for a long time that the God of Old Testament was a God of war and judgment and revenge, and an ogre almost, and the God of the New Testament is love and forgiveness and whatever. And that's nonsense. He's not schizophrenic. God, the God who created us, made his image, he's a God of love, but he is a God of war. And explaining the need to go and defend against that pure evil, there's a lot of Christians that just want to turn off from this conflict right now and ignore it. They don't want to preach about it. That's kind of frustrating. But we're out there trying to refine our message in an appropriate way to encourage Christians to stand with Israel. I think if you're on the other side, there's probably a lot of people. I too, I have sympathy for the Palestinian people. I'd just be a little afraid to express it right now because you're getting implicated with Hamas. But on the Christian side, to stand with Israel, I think some Christians, it's kind of hard when you got F-15s, F-16s, even F-35s bombing, buildings and whatever in Israel's modern military, that some Christians, they're a little reluctant to publicly take a stand with Israel because it is war. It's like you're standing with war, and a lot of Christians are reluctant to do that.
David, but I think the more accurate message would be to tell Christians that they're standing with Christianity if they stand with Israel. This is not about Israel. This is about light and darkness. This is about prophecy in our Tanakh and the New Testament. This is good and evil in its purest forms. And I think that we would be making a major mistake if we keep saying stand with Israel. It would be stand with the Judeo-Christian history, with Judeo-Christian future, by standing up for truth and standing up for moral clarity. So because this is a call for Christians to save themselves. But believe me, the same way that Osama bin Laden said to you guys on September the 12th, 2001, that the war is against the Zionist Crusader Alliance. Congratulations, you're the Crusader, we're the Zionists.
Yeah.
So I think that it's important that our Christian friends know that this is a war for their survival, for your survival as well as ours.
Hamas, by the way, in its charter, the 1988 charter, the original one, it talks about bringing Jews and Christians under the wing of Islam.
Yeah,
which is we want to conquer the world and we want to convert everyone to Islam.
Exactly. I mean, there's a whole education process that needs to go on for many Christians that, Western Christianity in particular, we've sort of moved on from the Crusades. A lot of the West is post-Christian, but in the eyes of the radical Muslims, we're still Crusaders, and that Israel is on the front line of a battle where radical Islam has this prophetic vision, often borrowing from biblical, whether Hebrew or Christian biblical text about the apocalypse, end of days, and a battle over Jerusalem. But when Khalid mentions the Hamas charter, it expressly recites the hadith about perpetual war between Muslims and Jews until Judgment Day, until a tribe of Muslims defeats a tribe of Jews, so that the Jews are hiding behind rocks and trees and saying, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come kill him. And even Fatah, I found this out from one of the Arab Israel. It's Mordechai Kadar. You know him. He's excellent.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
Arab affairs analyst. He said that no, it was Itamar Marcus of Palestinian Media Watch. I did a webinar with him a couple of weeks ago. He said 2 weeks after October 7, the Palestinian Authority's Ministry of Religious Affairs sent their talking points, their regular weekly talking points, to all the imams in the West Bank about what their sermon should say that Friday, the Muslim Sabbath, and it referenced the same hadith that Jews are hiding behind rocks and trees, and the imagery of that outdoor music festival at Ra'im, the Nova Festival, and all those Jewish people running and hiding in ditches, behind trees, behind this and that, for Hamas, for radical Muslims, and even what the Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, was promoting. They were promoting all that as prophetic fulfillment, that we are on the way not only to defeating Israel, but conquering the world. And the main obstacle to it is the little Satan, the big Satan, which is the Jewish state and Christian America, really Christian America, because we're the only ones who really would understand exactly what their vision is. I don't think Russia or China or some of these other countries that dabble and cooperate with this radical Islamic spirit, I don't think they realize how dangerous it is even for them.
I used to hear from Palestinian officials back then who were very close to Yasser Arafat that he liked to depict himself as the Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi.
Yes.
The great Muslim warrior who is here to drive the Crusaders out. And there was a time when Yasser Arafat met with a group of Christian leaders, and after the meeting, his office sent a communique to Palestinian newspapers, and the headline was, "The Christian leaders to Yasser Arafat, you are the Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, you are the great Muslim warrior." Yes. And when that newspaper, by the way, failed to publish that headline, Arafat ordered the arrest of the editor. The editor went to prison for 10 days in Jericho. Why? Because Arafat loved being put on equal footing with the great Muslim warrior. That's how he saw himself. Let's not forget that Yasser Arafat was a Muslim Brotherhood figure. He was a staunch support. I think Yasser Arafat is more Hamas than Hamas, by the way, or was more Hamas than Hamas.
Yes. I think when Arafat returned from Tunis, he first went to Gaza. He came back from somewhere, it might have been Tunis or some peace conference, and was welcomed in Gaza with all sorts of posters and all, calling him a modern-day Saladin as well. And yeah. For viewers out there, Saladin is considered this great Muslim historic figure for defeating the Crusaders at the Horns of Hittin and driving them out at eventually at Akko.
Yeah, very, very much so. At the same time, if you remember, the historic figure Yasser Arafat was also following the Oslo Accords, declaring his protection of and guardianship of the Christian holy sites in Jerusalem. You remember Chairman Arafat was talking about the day will come when the flag of Palestine will fly over the mosques and the minarets
and the churches
of Jerusalem. At the same time, it's so important to take into account what Khalid said, that he was a staunch Muslim brother, and this is actually what really got the hackles, raised the hackles of not only of Nasser, as well as following him Sadat afterwards, who called him a dog and thought he was one of the biggest threats to Egypt, and was actually thrown out of Egypt and left from Egypt. He spent time in Gaza, spent time in Kuwait. So this was a Muslim brother together with Abu Jihad, as well as
Abu
Khalid
Iyad
Salaf,
and
Abu Jihad,
Salah Khalaf.
and Salah Khalaf, the three founders of Fatah, who are all Muslim brothers. So we have to really take that into account, that to a large extent, in the religious idiom, Dave, this is a war. This is a war of, Islam's radical expression against Christians and Jews, and it's taking place in the Holy Land, as history would have it.
Yeah, and look, in Arabic, Arafat would say one thing and promote those sort of credentials, but in English he would, try and talk in terms of democracy and whatever. But the Kremlin was good at helping them with their verbiage to appeal to a Western audience. But today it's worse. Hamas is openly anti-Semitic on Islamist grounds, and they make no bones about it. They don't hide it in English and Arabic or whatever. And it's very troubling to see all the huge masses coming out. But I think even in Europe, we already saw a bit of a shift because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. The cutoff of natural gas and oil from Russia to Europe. People were freezing, and they're cold this winter, not only last winter, this winter. And all of a sudden, Israel seemed like a partner to a lot of Europeans again because of the natural gas offshore here. That was already starting. Now with this war, these European officials, we hear it today from Germany foreign minister, the Italian foreign minister, all saying, no, it'd be a disaster for Israel to go into Rafah and all this. But I tell you, most of the European people are very troubled with what is manifesting in their streets in the UK, in France, in Germany, in Holland. And it's, I think it's scary, but it'll take an election cycle or two for some of that to express itself. But, this is a year of major elections in 50 countries worldwide. And let's hope this Javier Milei, he's an interesting fellow. He's very unusual. But I think his heart is in the right place, and maybe he's a sign of where we're heading.
Well, David, I think you've said it very well as a wrap up to our program today, that there is really a strong reason for optimism and hope as we continue down this pathway of defending the small and one and only Jewish majority democratic nation state, with a distinguished Arab Muslim majority and minority, as well as an Arab Christian minority and a Druze minority, Circassians and others that we are here trying to defend in this tumultuous Middle East. So thank you ever so much for joining us, and thank you to our wonderful, loyal audience, highly educated audience, and your questions. And we will tomorrow, an extraordinary session where Khalid and I will be hosting the legendary Colonel Richard Kemp, the senior British commander in Afghanistan during the Afghanistan conflict, which the British played a major role, together with General Uzi Dayan of the famous Dayan family. Uzi, of course, was the former deputy chief of staff and head of the National Security Council. He is a fellow at JCPA, and he is one of the leaders of our Defensible Borders Initiative. Please join us tomorrow for what should be an extraordinary discussion about Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the moral dilemmas of warfare. This should be really an extraordinary session. So look forward to seeing you all. To everyone on this call, please ask one of your friends to come and join us. We want to have several hundred people tomorrow on the call. So tell one or two of your friends. It should be really an historic conversation. So thank you all. In the meantime, please be safe today. God bless everyone. We'll see you tomorrow at the same time right here, Jerusalem